Today we will apply solving simple linear equations to solving absolute value equations in one variable accurately. So absolute values, it's a measure of distance. Since it is a measure of distance, it's always going to be a positive number. You'll see here we have -5 and +5. When you take the absolute value of each of these, the answer is 5. It's going to be just a +5. For every non-zero absolute value, there are two numbers with that absolute value. And when you see questions like the absolute value of x equals 5, the question's asking for what values of x would make this absolute value 5. So in this case, we could put a 5 in there and it would be 5, or we could put a -5 in there and that would also be 5. Here are the steps for solving an absolute value equation. The first thing you're going to want to do is isolate the absolute value expression. Then you're going to rewrite the equation as two cases that do not involve absolute values. And then you're going to solve each equation separately. Let's see what that actually looks like. Here are some examples. So the first one, the absolute value of x equals 10. Well, we know that x could equal 10 or x could equal -10. If we take the absolute value of +10, it becomes 10. If we take the absolute value of -10, it also becomes 10. So this is your answer here. The next example, 2 times the absolute value of x minus 3 equals 20. The first step, if you remember, is to isolate your absolute value expression. So I'm going to isolate that by dividing the 2 out of there so that those can cancel. What I do to one side, I must also do to the other. And now I get the absolute value of x minus 3 equals 10. All right. So now I need to set up my two cases. Just like the absolute value of x, when it equaled 10, I set it equal to 10 and -10. I have to do the same thing here. I have to set this whole expression equal to 10, or maybe it equals -10. Now I need to solve each equation separately. So for this, I need to add 3 to both sides, and x could equal 13. Or if I add 3 to both sides here, x could equal -7, because -10 plus 3 is -7. So here is another example of absolute values. In this case, they're not the same number. So they don't always have to be the same number. Here we have the absolute value of x plus 2 equals 6. We need to isolate the absolute value. So I'm going to subtract 2 from each side. Now I have the absolute value of x equals 4. So it's going to be a lot like this one. X is going to equal 4, or x equals -4. So those are a few examples there. Some absolute value expressions don't have two answers. If the absolute value expression equals 0, there's only going to be one solution. And if it equals a negative number, then there will be no solutions. Let's look at some more examples of absolute value equations here. All right. So let's look at the first one here. I need to isolate my absolute value expression, so I need to get this by itself. So I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. So now I get 0 equals x minus 1. Now, there is no positive or -0, so I'm just going to set this x minus 1 equals 0. That's it. We only have to set up one equation in this case. Now I'll solve that equation really quickly. and I get x equals 1. That's my answer. There is only one solution because my absolute value expression equaled 0. Let's look and see what happens over here. I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides to isolate my absolute value. These cancel out, and it equals -1. If you remember, we cannot get an absolute value of a number and it be a negative. So because of this negative sign right here, after we isolated the absolute value, we now know there's no solution. We cannot take the absolute value of something and get a negative number. One more here. Subtract 3 from both sides. Negative absolute value of x plus 4 equals 3. Now, since we have the negative sign out here, we still have to get rid of that. So we have to multiply everything by -1 to get rid of this negative sign because our absolute value expression is still not isolated. So now I've got x. The absolute value of x plus 4 equals -3. Again, there's a negative here. So there is no solution. After we isolated the absolute value expression, we got a negative number. So there is no solution. Your homework for tonight is going to be page 57, numbers 14 through 28. But if you want more practice on this, you can go to IXL, Algebra 1, section L1.